selected verses from the book of Ruth. Hear these words. Now in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab. He and his wife had 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. When they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I too am old, and I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters. It has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you, or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you, so that it may be well with you. Now here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." She said to her, "All that you tell me I will do." So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David.
One of my go-to movies is My Big Fat Greek Wedding. The eclectic nature of the family, the vibrant expressions from which the family chooses to function, and the deep familial ties capture my attention every time I watch it. When the main character, Tula, meets the strong vegetarian teacher, Ian Miller, she falls in love with him. The two come from different backgrounds, and for Tula's family, the two could not work. Ian wasn't Greek. He wasn't one of them. He was a true outsider to the Portocalis family, and it felt like a betrayal to them that Tula would want to marry someone who was not from their culture. Tula and Ian found ways to become family and be dedicated to each other. With each step, they continued to find ways to include their families and join their different cultures together, making space for every person. I think that's what I love about the movie. Ian and Tula don't negate their heritage or their stories, but find ways to honor them, still moving into a new normal together. Throughout the movie, you see the strength of the Portocalis women and how they guide and support the whole during these tough times. They do this through retelling the stories of the women who came before them and how each generation made a way for themselves. In each retelling, they encourage the next generation of women to find out how to live out their joy and survive in ways that they are able to thrive. The Portocalis family captures family pride. They love their heritage and wrestle with how to move into a new normal. As devout Greek Orthodox people, Tula's family had to figure out how to welcome the non-Greek Ian Miller into their family. Ian came to a place where he was able to look at Tula and respect her faith tradition and take it as his own. In watching My Big Fat Greek Wedding this past week, couldn't help but be reminded of the story of Ruth. Outsiders joining their stories together, living through the hardships of life, and finding out how faith can move them into a new normal with strength and risk. Just as the Portocalis women carried their faith to engage the outsider, the book of Ruth tells how the Israelites were carried through by two widows who lived through unbelievable odds. They were people who were unexpected and should not have carried the faith through at all, but did. Ruth and Naomi understood family pride in a way that captures it beyond anything one of my go-to movies could convey. In the story of Ruth, as Andrew just read it, we heard portions of chapters 1, 3, and 4. My favorite part of Ruth and Naomi's story is Ruth's speech of dedication and covenantal language to her mother-in-law. Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God, and where you die, I will die. Behind that language, there's something even more remarkable to me. Ruth will be a foreigner in Naomi's land. You see, Naomi understands what it is to be a foreigner in enemy territory, and she is of the Hebrew people and living in the land of the Moabites. Now Ruth will be the foreigner as she leaves her people to follow her mother-in-law. But when Naomi sends her daughter-in-laws back, she's basically saying, stay with your people, I will return to mine, and we will find some safety in our cultural norms. And Ruth in return says, no, we are family. We may not be blood, and sure, we may even be from enemy tribes, but we are still family, and we shall stay together. Orpah does as Naomi said and returns to her people. You'll notice that she's not criticized. It is understood and respected that she would return back to her family's house. There's no comparison between these three women of who was more faithful. Rather, it shows in this story how two of the three women changed our faith tradition through radical fidelity. Naomi agrees to allow Ruth to stay with her and says, "Come, I will make sure you are safe. I will find a kinsman redeemer for you, and we will make this work." Ruth journeys into a foreign land, into enemy territory, and these women find strength together. There's something about hospitality that I gravitate to in this story. Even though Ruth has nothing to give Naomi, she gives her widow mother-in-law her presence. Naomi may have lost her husband and her sons, but Ruth will not allow her to lose her as well. It was not without continued risk or struggle, though. These two women were now unprotected by cultural protections of husbands or sons. Yet they flipped everything society told them would be their future on its head and figured out how to function once again. A new normal that was beyond comprehension. Naomi keeps her word to protect Ruth by finding their next of kin for her to marry. Naomi learns that it's Boaz that is the one next of kin and ensures that Ruth knows how to approach him and initiate the possibility of marriage. It is from this unexpected marriage between Ruth and Boaz that we get King David. Ruth is the great-grandmother of King David, the line from which Jesus comes. That's not a small statement. A foreigner, an outsider, someone completely unacceptable, is the grandmother of the one who produces King David, and eventually those who produce Jesus himself. With Ruth's son, Naomi is now protected once again by society's familial protections, for she now has a grandson. The two women care for each other and defy the odds, and in doing so, carry on the faith tradition that produces God incarnate. What I appreciate about this story is it doesn't make everything pretty. This story doesn't gloss over the pain or the struggle that Ruth and Naomi went through. In our society today, it sometimes can feel like we need to gloss over the tough parts of our story. To say our pain was God's will, or that we are too blessed to be bogged down by our struggles. The story of Ruth and Naomi tells it how it was for them. Naomi leaves Bethlehem because there was no bread, which is pure irony because Bethlehem means house of bread. So her family are refugees into the foreign land of Moab. And when she is there, her husband dies, and her sons marry foreign women, which was not acceptable at the time. And then her sons die. Naomi is willing to send her only family she has left back, her foreign daughter-in-laws, back to their mother's houses. She eventually even renames herself Mara to mean bitter. The story of Ruth and Naomi is not one of joyful explanations of life's hardships. There was never a moment where they said, "In God's name," or "For God's will we do this." The only time in the first half of the story that God is even mentioned is when Ruth proclaims that a foreigner's God will become her God. You see, Yahweh was not Ruth's God, but she was willing to claim Yahweh as the God she would follow, the God she would believe in, the God she would declare her life to. And in doing so, that risk of faithfulness produces the God incarnate. There was no promise to Ruth and Naomi that in risking community together, they would be great-great-grandmother and great-grandmother to the grand King David. There was no dismissing their pain or experience to bring about God's light. It was through the cracks of life that these women lived, and in being present with each other, God's light came through. In the unexpected faithfulness of foreigners turned family, the story of God continues. Calvary, our life right now can feel like a desert, both personally and collectively. Many of us are experiencing new normals that were not brought about by joyful experiences. Some of us have new normals because we've received new diagnoses, wondering what to do next with treatment, being let go from work, waiting for an opportunity that has yet to come, considering what the future of our life will be together, or pondering how to function in a church that may feel different than it has before. Life is not easy. And as we are in a season of storytelling, I would encourage all of us to figure out how to tell our stories the way Ruth and Naomi's stories have been captured. When times are hard, it's okay to name that times are hard. When we live in a world that tells us to protect ourselves more than figuring out how to live in radical hospitality and how that radical hospitality can bring about new beginnings. It can be a very hard time to figure out how to tell our own stories when the struggles out there seem bigger than we feel. It can be hard to know how our stories fit in it all. But may we be encouraged by the story of Ruth and Naomi, for each of your stories are worth telling. When we learn how being community to each other, allows for a new normal, we find ways to be faithful to one another, and in doing so create a collective new normal of hospitality. We're not too different than Ruth and Naomi. As we venture through this season of life, a season where there's great joy, confusion, and uncertainty, may we lean in. May we lean into one another's lives and join each other in the moments of sorrow and of jubilation. Lean in and hear the stories of this community in such a way that we get to understand who we are in this very moment as we recall our individual stories with the Passions and Perspectives ministry team. May we not just wait for somebody from that ministry team to ask about our stories. May we turn to each other and realize that each and every one of us continues the lineage of Ruth and Naomi, David and Jesus. And no matter what day it is the day that we can tell our story. Each of your stories is brilliant, vibrant, no matter how insignificant you may feel at times. Your joys, your sorrows, your struggles, your triumphs carry on and bring about the manifestation of God every single day. You are the face of God in a time where people wonder why they should still believe. The face of God is beautiful, for your lives are beautiful. As I look out on this congregation, I am reminded of the beauty that comes from our individual stories that then interweave to create the story of Calvary. I'm often reminded of the struggles to figure out how we validate our own stories, living into the pain and the delights we experience daily while caring about those that are different than me. Ruth and Naomi's stories were strengthened by joining together. In the story, we see two ways that they were healed. The first was being really willing to risk their own safety for the other, and then being willing to care for the one that represented the outsider. Through their community with each other, they healed from being widows at society's whims and healed from believing the outsider was worth neglecting. They became well by living life together as they honored their own stories and changed their outsider to family. As I question where I see this in my own life, whose stories do I wrestle to join with? I turn through all the ways society labels and places me in categories and how often I do it to others. If I don't use the practice of confession, which allows me to acknowledge stories different than mine and find ways to share our stories together, I open myself up to the danger of giving into guilt, fear, anger, and lose the ability to see our commonality and the strength in unity. After questioning whom I need to work with to strengthen my own story by joining theirs, the first thing that stands out to me is my very skin. As I look at my skin, I can't deny that I am white, and that there are moments where I've wrestled with this skin I bear, the skin that society says gives me more power than human beings of color. I wish it didn't. I didn't ask for it. As much as I don't want the power given to me and given to the race I represent, I also don't want to live in a society that says people of color are less than, that their race means they can be trusted less, that if they just did this or did that, their worth would be acknowledged and honored. So I wrestle with my story as a white person of privilege to join the stories of Black Lives Matter. Because as a person who has never been told that I don't matter because of my race, I want to stand with those who fight to have their value acknowledged. I wrestle to loosen the fears that come with acknowledging my privilege and give way to the freedoms that come from acknowledging it and working to not perpetuate inequality. As somebody who grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck, I can understand the struggle my parents made. Yet no matter how hard it was for my parents, who were not college graduates and worked multiple jobs, I can't say that I know what it is to be poor. My siblings and I were not born into systematic poverty. So as somebody who would love to say, I know what it is to be poor, I get your struggle, I can't. I can say I know what it is to see my parents struggle and give all they had to their children. And it is from the knowledge that I had privilege because I was not born into the cycle of poverty that makes me all the more passionate to figure out how we stand with our brothers and sisters who are poor, to listen to their voices and needs and ensure that we work together to guarantee they have that next step needed to dismantle the perpetual cycle of poverty. As a cisgender straight person, I want to scream that I am an ally and actively live out every chance I get. But if I ever forget that it is not my voice that needs to be heard when I'm with people of the LGBTQ community, I miss the chance to listen, the chance to stand alongside and be willing to risk my own well-being because I stand with my brothers and sisters who are sexual minorities. Because the minute I don't listen or stand with them, I am no ally. To continually find and create space where the majority of sexuality and identity is not dominating, and to ensure our brothers and sisters are not forced to assimilate to the culture of the sexual majority. If you know me, you know part of my own family pride is that I am from Czechoslovakian and Yugoslavian descent on one side and Irish and Scottish on the other. Could I have more fiery blood running through these veins? I am very proud of my heritage. I am proud of my ancestors. I am reminded, though, that my birth certificate says I am a U.S. citizen. And if I ever forget that my immigrant ancestors were the ones to bring my family here, I forget what it was for them to seek a better life. It opens me up to forget those today who wish to seek that same betterment that my ancestors sought. If I ever forget their struggle, I'm erasing what they fought for because it's become my norm not to struggle with calling this country my home. So I share these confessions with you because they are a part of my story. the struggle to find my story as a person of privilege without giving way to fears of guilt for the societal privilege I have. My story is rooted in faith, and I could not acknowledge the privilege I was born into and the privilege I have gained over time without confession and the belief in transformative grace and love. The faith tradition I have found true to be true for me allows me to believe that grace, forgiveness, hospitality, and love are possible. For me, I just listed people that are often categorized as the other, the outsider, whether I name them as such or whether society says we should be at odds. In times when it feels like my story is threatened or insignificant, I am reminded of the story of Ruth and Naomi. If I look at people who are different than me as anything other than a child of God, other than family, even if not by blood, I miss out on a chance to be transformed. When I learn to see people as family by choice, community by risk, and it keeps me from turning inward towards apathy. As part of this community, I have to lean into each and every one of your stories and remember that you are my chosen family, community by risk. And when I live into that truth, anything is possible. Calvary, we have some healing to do. And as we do it, maybe remember that this world has some healing to do also. Our healing inside these walls can be simultaneously joined with the healing outside of these walls. When our healing joins the healing of whoever the outsider is for each of us, whether by choice or societal proclamation, we heal both internally and externally. May I never be too comfortable that I forget that I am an outsider to somebody, that I am the other to anyone who does not look like me, does not have the same socioeconomic status, does not have the same sexual majority, does not have the same privilege, that I am the other. And may I lean into their stories, not because my story is insignificant, but because my story can no longer go on without joining their story, without joining our stories. The journey of radical hospitality and risk-taking community is built on our beautiful stories, guided by fidelity to one another. Our stories carry on the story of God. And Calvary, may our communal story be one that joins forces with the marginalized and the outcast. Let us remember that each of us, at different times in our lives, will experience struggle and injustice. And in those times, may we remember that our stories cannot be overshadowed when we join another story, but that our stories are amplified by joining the stories of the communities around us. As a community, we're figuring out where we go next. Regardless of our differences, I join with you in the belief that love is possible, peace is tangible, and equality values all human dignity. Calvary, you are the face of God. You do good work. Your sorrows are valid. Your experiences are true, and your faith can transform. Ruth and Naomi were not heroes in the steps they took. They simply were being faithful. But you see, they've become heroes in our faith tradition because of the mundane act of choosing family. Calvary, may we be heroes to one another as we make the mundane act of choosing one another as family. Calvary, you're a part of my community, and I am part of yours. As we lean in, let us not be afraid of the outsider. Let us realize our stories are significant, and let us realize that when we join the marginalized, we stand against apathy, and we defy the powers that be. And as we do so, we carry on the lineage of God incarnate. You are the beloved children of God. And with every day we continue to live this thing called life together, we make it even more so. We defy what society tells us is the goal in life. Every time we look to each other and say, where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God shall be my God. Just as Ruth and Naomi defied their societies and chose to stick together, we make the choice to lean in, and we become the unexpected community for one another. The unexpected community in Denver. Let our family pride as Calvary continue the lineage that was started by two widows who chose to be defined as family.